Hello, I'm Robert,
And I'm Evelyn.
and this is Talk.
This is part 2 of our 3-part appendices.
Yes,
Last time we talked about the little short interlude of Aragorn and Arwen. This time we're going to be talking about the next part. We decided to pronounce this Earl, correct?
correct.
So it's the House of Eorl. And then for the next part is the one that everyone requested, so we wanted to make sure we did a good job and saved it for last, which is the timeline of events of the Fellowship of the Ring after Lord of the Rings happened.
Right.
So literally all of you requested that.
Yeah, so it's basically about the beginning of the next age.
Right, exactly. So we're really excited to do it. So we saved it for last because we wanted to make sure we do it justice, since literally all of you requested it.
So, House of Earl. A couple quick things here. Earl is an Old English word referring to a person of noble rank.
Right. I've heard that as a rank before.
And then the highest rank of nobility in North Germany, in the North Germanic culture, was Earl.
Okay.
And it really did not get picked up in Britain until the 9th century.
Really? Okay.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
that's interesting that it came later.
Right.
Okay.
Especially since it's a rank in Britain that comes.
It's like
it comes between.
Yeah, it's like, lower middle.
Yeah, it's below Duke, if I remember correctly. And then
I want to say can't remember what it's above, but I want to say it's Viscount. We will look this up later because we should have done that earlier.
we could also have one of our British listeners tell us.
Hey, Nikita, talking to you. That would actually be really helpful because I don't know that stuff. So the House of Eorl refers to an actual guy who is Earl. So the House of Eorl is an actual person. And he was the lord of the men of Atheed. If we're going to pronounce it Earl, that's how I would pronounce this. Is Atheed, because Earl is EO and the beginning of this is EO. So I would use the same pronunciation for that EO, the
Right.
So, yeah, so the man of Atheed. And they talked about them. So I actually did a deep dive into this because there were 2 words I didn't recognize. So I decided to look them up. The first is they said they were close in origin to the Bjorning. And I kind of, like, the words sounded familiar. And when I looked it up, it is a race of large men who are skin changers. And without any spoilers, since we're going to be doing Hobbit stuff soon, there is a character named Bjorn. That's all I'm going to say, is there's a character named Bjorn, and he is kind of related to the Bjornings. So that's just where I recognize it from. Then they also say that they claim that the forefathers are descent from the Rovanian. So that was one where I might ask you a little bit more clarification because I couldn't find anything specific, because from what I found, it's about it explains or describes people of different races from this particular part of the northern part of Mirkwood.
Right. So,
and the Bjornings happen to also be from there.
Right.
So like men and elves and even some halflings and hobbits descend from this area. So do you have anything like further clarification of the specific humans? Because all I saw
not just humans. So this area, just to give you an idea of how much of Middle Earth this area takes up, it's home to 2 elf kingdoms.
Yes, I did see that.
And also, this is where the Harefoots come from.
Yeah.
And right, so it's because it's a plain.
Hmm.
So
It's a
it's
very large portion of Middle Earth.
right, and it's a plain. So
Hmm.
that's where the farms are going to be. That's where um, you know, you can ride fast from point to point because it's level ground and
Right.
so forth.
Because what I saw is the humans were called Northmen, and they are descendants of the first men, is the only clarification about the humans of the Rovanian. Is that how you pronounce it? The Rovanian?
That's how I have it written.
Rovanian?
That yeah, Ravonian.
Ravanian. Okay. So that's the only thing I found about the humans from there. But that would be significant if they were descendants of that. I can't pronounce it at all. It starts with an A. The precursors to the first humans
Right.
settled there.
Also, what's interesting is this area has a connection with the Witch King.
Yes, I did see that. That was something that was in there I thought was really interesting. Um, but yeah, so it also says they're kinsmen of Gondor through one of the um Numenor, is that how you pronounce it? I'm just really bad at pronounce things, guys, so bear with me. So some of them also went over there as well. So which is why they're considered kinsmen of Gondor. But just like you were saying, they love the plains and horses and anything to do with horsemanship. Now, I happen to be allergic to horses. I found that out while I took my first horse riding lesson.
She was at she
Sheepskin.
was supposed to be at a week-long horse camp.
After 3 days of trying to like figure out if it's the hay or the dandruff or whatever, it was the horses. I was allergic to the horses. I even had to switch cabins to a different camp because the horsehair on the girls made my allergies so bad. So unfortunately, I don't know too much about horses, but a cousin of mine,
They're just big dogs.
they are big dogs, according to my dog. But one of my cousins is an equine vet
Yes.
and loves horse racing and barrel racing is what she was really into as a teen.
You're talking about two different cousins.
Am I?
Yes.
I probably am. A lot of my cousins ride horses. I was the cousin that didn't because I was allergic. Um, but I know something about horsemanship because they would talk about it
Right.
because I grew up with these cousins.
So
So it's just really cool, like the different types of things you can do with horses. And so I can just imagine it a little bit.
okay.
But yeah, you mentioned the Witch King.
Right. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything more. Matter of fact, there's not that much more in the appendices.
There really
It just
isn't.
mentions that this is where he was when he got overthrown.
Right. He was overthrown, and because they were in a time of prosperity, there was a lot of them and they needed more land. So they kind of went into those lands and took it
So,
to expand.
okay. Uh, now, are we ready to start talking more about Earl now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at. And then that's where we get to Earl.
Okay. So Earl was called Earl the Younger.
Hmm.
And this has to do with one, he came into power at age 16 when his father died. And we'll
Yeah.
talk about that in a second or two.
Hmm.
And he never lost his yellow hair. His hair
Hmm.
never turned gray. It stayed, that same brilliant yellow
Hmm.
hair. And then, and as I said, his father died. His father was really big into horses.
Yeah.
And he was seen as one of the horse masters.
Right. And his whole thing that he really loved to do was to try to catch and tame wild horses. But unfortunately, that was his downfall.
Right. He was trying to break a horse named
its original name was, oh, I'm blanking on it, but it was something like Mansbane or something. Mansbane or
No,
something.
that was a curse.
No, that's what the horse was named, and then they renamed it.
No.
So we looked it up just now.
So Evan is right as far as
So
how she reads it.
right in the appendices, the quote is, "Come forth, Mansbane, and get a new name." So that's why I thought Mansbane was what they had been calling the horse. But you said that there's other references that have been written where
Right, yeah.
it was
Well,
more of just a curse, like it was a swear.
right, because there's another beast called Mansbane. It just means the bane of men.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Because I can see, like, sometimes you, like, when your dog does something, you give them a little, like, nickname. Like, I call my boy Angel Butt because he's kind of a butthead, but he's also my angel.
All right. So
So anyway, yes. So
and this
so Earl, the first thing that really struck out to me though is everyone was expecting him to just kill the horse.
right.
And he surprised everyone by not killing the horse.
Right. His revenge on the horse was breaking him.
Right.
All right. And then so I'm going to pronounce this wrong.
Okay.
Because I could not find a pronunciation guide for it.
Well, I didn't
But
even bother writing it down because I wasn't going to try. So his new name is
Farlofov is what I'm getting. Farlofov.
I'll go with it.
And he is an ancestor to Shadowfax.
Is he?
Yep.
We had to pause and look this up again because it's one thing with me reading the appendices without knowing the further references, because the way that I read it is that his descendants were only written by the kings until Shadowfax, which I thought meant that someone actually rode Shadowfax, but now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, oh no, Gandalf rode Shadowfax, and apparently you were saying in other references about Shadowfax is also a descendant of his.
Yes.
Because I thought Shadowfax was like the Lord of Horses and was born from a great.
Exactly.
I thought it was like a Pegasus type situation.
No.
So he was actually born of an actual like horse.
Yes.
Oh, because I thought it was like a mythical creature type thing.
But this horse that he breaks is a legendary beast.
Oh, so he's considered a legendary. Okay, that makes that makes much more sense. See, this is why it's good to read the other references, which I'll eventually read all of them in the 20 plus years that we're going to be doing this to try to read everything.
All right, and so
shout out if you also got confused with the appendices without other clarification.
Now, okay, so something I want to. Oh, so he is also known as King of the Mark, which are the Rohan.
Right.
He
because I was going to talk about why he becomes the King of the Mark. Are you about to talk about that?
Go ahead.
Okay. This part I also found just really interesting and stuck out to me because in the books and obviously in the movies there's the classic line about where was Gondor when we needed them. So as kind of a background, the reason that they're allies of Gondor in the first place is Gondor was under attack by wild men and orcs at the same time. Whether or not it was planned or not is unknown, but either way, they needed a lot of help, and the allies they had at the time they were struggling with something else, so they weren't able to really send much reinforcements. So Earl just kind of came in with all of his men and helped them. And like Gondor had no idea they were coming. It was kind of a miracle for them that Earl showed up with his men and helped defeat them. So that's why Gondor gave them a ton of Plains land. And so Earl becomes the first king of the Mark, where they are their own they're their own people, they have their own kings and laws, and they are free men with a permanent allegiance to Gondor,
So
which comes into a little bit later.
You ready for some controversy?
Absolutely, I am.
Okay, so Earl leads his men to hunt down and kill all
the fleeing and retreating. I did read that, yeah.
He committed genocide.
What do you mean? Like,
he killed off a race.
He just straight up killed off a whole race?
Pretty much.
Dang.
I mean, he might not, he didn't kill them all because we know that they're still around, but I mean,
he attempted, because yeah, you're right. He didn't just defend Gondor. He was following the retreat.
He was following the retreat, continued to kill them.
So he definitely committed a war crime, at least one war crime.
But
okay, yeah. I guess the Geneva Conventions aren't in this world yet.
They're not in this world now.
Okay.
Okay. So, and then there's something else that it's just lightly touched on, and you really have to figure this out. So, all right. So now we're moving on to the next person. You ready to talk about Fram?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it talks about so it briefly mentions there's a lot of not just great kings and leaders, but great men and women across the Rohim, where there's songs and stories. But it says the next king of note is Helm Hammerhand.
So you're trying to rush the more interesting guy, but Fram becomes before Helm.
Oh yeah, I just glanced over that part.
Exactly. Everybody glances over that part.
Glanced over because he came off as really bad, and I didn't realize how bad Earl was before you pointed it out, which is why I think I glossed over him.
So Fram killed a dragon, Skepha, and he went to take the whole horde, and some bad blood ended up coming up between him and the dwarves. And it is said by many that Fram was killed by the dwarves.
Yeah, for insulting them because they had claim to his horde, which I'm trying to say how to phrase this without doing any Hobbit spoilers. There are parallels to the Hobbit. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, if you know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, you know about dragons.
So dwarves have immense wealth. Dragons usually take that wealth, and dwarves want to reclaim their wealth, but the people who kill the dragons are like, no, I killed the dragon, I get it. So there's parallels. That's all I'm going to say. There's parallels. History tends to repeat itself.
And so then we get the whole thing about Helm.
Yeah, so there's Helm Hammerhead, which I know I'm jumping a little bit, but Helm's Deep from the book was a stronghold for him at one point.
Yeah, named after him.
Is named after him. So that was just kind of cool getting that background itself of Helm's Deep. But he was considered like a really great king. And he was a pretty good ruler. But there was this guy, Freka, who that's how I'm pronouncing it.
Yeah, that's Freka.
That Freka. Anyway, so
I think that's my new one.
Yeah, so this guy Freka, he claims descendant of one of the older kings, but he's more Dunelandish than anything because he has dark black hair, and he kind of just like he doesn't hang out with the other Rohim. He kind of has his own group of men, and he goes into the swamps and he kind of accumulates a lot of wealth, and he starts to get a very high opinion of himself.
Well, and Freka means bold man.
Of course it does.
Um,
To have the confidence of an entitled white
but
man.
but so Helm and Freka have a fight.
Right, because Freka just shows up one day because
I mean, a literal fight, one-on-one fight.
no, I know, but
Yeah.
but I'm giving context here.
Yeah.
He has such a high opinion of himself that he just shows up and demands that Helm's daughter marries his son, and Helms just literally just starts making fun of him because the guy, he's not a fighter. He's a bit large around the belt, is what they say. And he basically is like, I don't permit fighting in our gathering place. So we're going to head outside. So this is a classic mess around and find out situation. And he's like, I have way more men than you, so it's just going to be a one-on-one fair match. And like Helm just gets one good hit in.
One Punch Man.
Yeah, it really is. It's a one punch KO that he just goes.
No, not KO.
Oh yeah,
he's not just knocked out.
Yeah, he's dead.
He'd be dead.
He did. And so he died from the blow, and then his son, who was his heir, and all of his men are then declared enemies.
Yes.
So
now,
this goes into what I kind of mentioned before, because like I said, I just found this really interesting about because I remember asking you about it, and you said, "We'll see." When they mentioned in the book and in the movie about where was Gondor when we were in need, and they were in need at one point. The short version is they ended up in Helm's Deep because there was a lot of enemies out there, and so Wolf, who was the son of Freka, uses the opportunity to join with their enemies, and then he declares himself king. And while they are in Helm's Deep, Helm became basically a Finnish World War II assassin, where he dressed in all white and he just went around terrorizing his enemies and just killing them in the snow.
And they would see him from afar, and he looked like a stone statue.
Yeah.
Just
staring at them. And there was like terrible rumors that made them even more frightened of him. And unfortunately, he did finally die. But even when he died, he did not kneel. He died standing up and became that frozen stone.
Right.
So even in death, he did not kneel.
Right. Also, so when a lot of this fighting is going on, it's taking place in the Fens. F-E-N, Fens.
Okay.
Which is it's a wetland.
Right, yeah.
And it's the wetland that peat gets formed from.
Well, okay.
So, so actually, this, even though it's a wetland, it's very valuable wetland because it is
like there's
peat.
Yeah, because there's a lot of resources. But yeah, the winter was, it talks about how the winter was really hard for both sides. Like both sides really suffered. The Rohim had a lack of food, but also the enemies were freezing to death type situation. And again, Gondor just never showed up because apparently they had other things going on. They had their own issues, but they didn't send any help. So it was Helm's nephew who, once the spring came, he went out and he very quickly and a little easily defeated the enemies and the would-be king and just cut them all down, and then he became king.
Right. So you ready to move into
the last little part?
Freolf? Is that who you're
That's who I'm talking about.
That's who you're talking about.
Again, I didn't even bother to write his name down because I knew I couldn't pronounce it. But at the same time, something really... So once he became king...
So not just once... As he was being crowned...
Yeah.
Guess who shows up? Saruman.
It's Saruman.
So he appears. And at first they think this is a great guy.
Yeah, they're like, this is a
Uh,
great
you know,
guy. He's going to be a lot of help. He's the White Wizard.
so so gave him they gave him stuff.
Hmm.
Um,
They were basically like, Isengard is considered Gondor's, but we're gonna let you have it.
right, and well, not just Isengard, also gave him Orthanc,
Yeah, right, right.
and uh, and then he becomes a lord of men.
Yeah.
So
So he was really playing the long game.
yeah, so here's something that I was thinking about as I was reading it. So one of the interesting things I thought about when I was reading this time was did he use magic? Was he just very charismatic? Um, was he somehow threatening them?
Yeah.
And you don't, I mean, we
I was kind of
really don't know.
That's something I was thinking about too, because like I said, my first thought was he was really playing the long game. And then what I thought about is his whole justification to Gandalf about um aligning himself with Sauron was that if he got the ring, he could defeat Sauron and everything will be fine. But we see here that he's getting influence. We don't see any of the other wizards, especially Gandalf, taking any real influence or lands. So it really is because we know that Gandalf was basically offered to be the head and be the White Wizard, and Gandalf was like, "Nah, I'm good," and so Saruman took it. So we know he kind of had ambition from the very beginning, and that shows here. Whether or not there was malicious intent at least at first, we're not entirely sure either. But this definitely shows he has this ambition to just have stuff, which as wizards, basically, because they're what, angels, you said? They basically angels?
Yeah,
Yeah, like they shouldn't want any of that.
right. And the other thing I find interesting about it is that, you know, and it's not just one tower, it's two.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Two towers.
you finally got it.
No, I thought the two towers was Isengard and Sauron's.
So, Isengard and Orthanc, um, and so, as I said earlier, so Saruman becomes a lord of men.
Yeah. And like having like a lordship over men, that is insane. Because so it's not I'm going to say it's not biblical canon, but there are disputed religious texts that most people do not consider real that do tell these stories of these fallen angels that integrated with humans and had human children and were really corrupted, and that was part of the influence for Noah's flood. I know it was more of me just being interested in just reading other things, but I know that most, at least in Christianity, like most people, and I think Judaism too, like most people don't consider that a thing, but there's like these old texts that tell those stories, and that's just what this reminds me of.
Yeah, yeah,
Is those stories of these fallen angels that they they aren't good anymore because they get tempted by humans and human things.
right.
Is That's just which is really interesting because Isengard gets flooded. I wonder if Tolkien did that on purpose. I just thought of that. That would be because he like even if he didn't believe in it, he probably knew about those texts.
Well, considering that
He translated a lot of them too.
yeah,
So maybe. Ooh, I'm smart. I made a connection. I'm so proud of myself right now.
yeah, we even have a full moon once in a while. So I don't have anything else here. You have anything else?
No, I just like the part one when we were talking about Aragorn and Arwen. I really liked this. The first one was definitely more narrative. It was more of a retelling of a story versus this was more of a historical narrative. But it's not written in a very dry, boring history textbook way.
Right.
There's a good writing to it.
And also, as I read this again just earlier today,
Mhm.
there's a lot more like reading between the lines.
Yeah.
And also it's like saying, well, it's you couldn't make it more obvious other than saying, well, you know what I mean,
Right.
or
Oh,
yeah,
definitely. Yeah, the part with, because now that I really think about it, the part with Fram, was his name? Like, yeah, because I just read that quickly. I'm like, well, well, that dude met a dark end. But when we were talking about it, it's like, oh, that's actually really clever of Tolkien.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So I think that's it.
yeah, I think that's it for this one. So, like I said, the next episode is going to be our part 3, which is going to be the fellowship. And so we already agreed that, and we'll talk about this at the beginning too. We already agreed that while we are going to talk about obviously all of the timeline of the fellowship after the events of Lord of the Rings, I gave Dad permission to take from other sources and to include other things that happened specifically to the fellowship, which is the start of this new fourth age. So that's the constriction, is we're only talking about the immediate main in the immediate characters of the fellowship plus Gandalf. But I think, well, and a couple others that's very important that we get into, because I know at least 2 of you were like, talk about Faramir. So,
And,
some of those type of things,
yeah,
like the really important character. I mean, they're all important, but yeah, you have permission to use other sources.
like you have, like I have to get your permission,
Well, the concern was spoilers.
right? And who did we have to worry about that today?
I know we behind the scenes we had to stop and re-record a few parts because I did let loose some Hobbit spoilers. So what made it through this episode was me trying really, really hard. It was much worse.
She was so much worse than I get when I go down a rabbit hole
Yeah.
because she was doing spoilers.
Well, because The Hobbit, like we've mentioned, The Hobbit's the only one of Tolkien's work I have previously actually read. So I'm excited that when we get to it, I'll actually know stuff. I just gave him like just a
Cheshire Cat smile.
Cheshire Cat grin.
I've been Robert.
And I've been Evelyn.
And this is Token About It.